Part 16. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Se Nian Bai. Chapter 151. Time flies, and with the unremitting efforts of the shrimp soldiers and crab generals, the passage under Shuahun Lake and Shuaxi Lake was finally opened and connected to each other. Tai Sui still lay down and took a bath at the bottom of the small lake in Shuaxi every day. Su Ming tried it a few times and found that the sky was no different from before. He didn't know that it would take until the year of the monkey and the horse to truly transform into an animal and communicate with him. The weather has turned a bit colder, and the fish riding business is no longer easy to do. In fact, there are still tourists, but Su Ming is not worried about letting tourists go into the water in such a cold day. It is not good to catch a cold, fever or something, so he is ready to go again. For a week or two, take a break from riding fish. In just 3 months, a few big fish earned Su Ming almost 500,000 yuan in profit. It was time to let them rest and gain some fat before fighting again next year. Liang Shi naturally became the manager of the aquarium. He spent half of the day in the aquarium, taking care of the finless porpoises while writing papers, and half of the time was spent on Shuahun Lake, taking care of Su Ming's fish. It's so amazing, it completely subverts my common sense. Liang Shi and Su Ming were both wearing one-piece rubber overalls, standing in the shallow water area, with their waists submerged in the water. Liang Shi was holding a large crucian carp weighing 50 to 60 pounds in his hand. He pointed at the big crucian carp and said to Su Ming, "It only took less than half a year for the fish to grow." Fish farming has a fixed cycle. The 4 domestic fish species are economic species and grow relatively quickly. However, the growth rate of fish in Su Ming Shuahun Lake is still far beyond Liang Shi's expectations and common sense. Every once in a while, he would find samples of various fish from the lake to observe, and found that the growth rate of fish in Shuahun Lake was about 1 to 4 times higher than that in other environments. Therefore, after 3 or 4 months, the previous growth rate most of the fry have grown into adult fish. Most of the silver carp and bighead carp weigh more than 2 kilograms, the largest herring and grass carp have exceeded 3 kilograms, and the relatively small crucian carp is generally more than half a kilogram, all of which have reached the standard for sale. And you see. As he spoke, he excitedly pointed at the crucian carp struggling in his hand and said, "It's fat, but it's very strong. This shows that it doesn't just rely on feed to fatten up." "Why is that?" Su Ming asked, deliberately pretending not to understand. "If you are constantly in contact with spiritual power, it would be strange if the fish in the lake don't grow fast. The big-headed catfish is now 10 pounds. When I first saw it, it was less than 1 pound and looked like a mutated tadpole. In just a short time, its weight has increased by more than 10 times. Other fish have grown that's considered slow." Liang Shi has always been a bit stubborn when it comes to academic matters. He shook his head seriously and said, "To be honest, I don't know why. But I guess there are several reasons. On the one hand, it's the feed you put in and the breeding methods. It's suitable. On the other hand, the large number of tourists in Shuahun Lake also makes the fish more active. And, maybe it's because the water quality here is better. But it's still hard to understand. It's really puzzling." "Why?" When speaking, Liang Shi showed a shy expression of embarrassment, as if he felt that Su Ming trusted him and left such a huge task to him, but he failed to understand the reason why the fish grew so fast and well. Betrayed Su Ming's trust. Su Ming felt that he couldn't bear to fool an honest man like this, so he suppressed his laughter and said, "No matter what, this is a good thing. You can also stay here and continue your research. Maybe you can get a Nobel Prize or something." "Brother Su is kidding, I don't have that ability. However, you can start contacting the market. Except for keeping some of the breeding fish, the rest can be sold," Liang Shi said. "Wait a minute, I'm going on a business trip soon. I'll contact the buyer immediately when I get back," Su Ming said. Last time I had dinner with Xiaoyun and we discussed how Xiaoyun could help recommend a few restaurants to try out. Xiaoyun has not been in Yangchuan recently. According to Zhao Qian, he went to South Africa to attend some gold mining conference and has not returned for more than a month. Damn it, does he still have gold mines in South Africa? Su Ming couldn't help but pursed his lips. After calling a long distance across the country, he realized that it was just a gathering of collectors from all over the world. The so-called gold mine just sounded good and had nothing to do with half a dime of gold. He also had it will take many weeks to come back. It just so happened that the city assigned a task to the zoo. Director Song directly handed the task over to Su Ming, who needed to go on a business trip to Changping County next door. After returning to Ting Feng Shui Pavilion, he made some preparations. He gathered all the animals at home, large and small, and told them not to cause trouble when he was not around. Early the next morning, Su Ming left the zoo in his Wrangler and headed for Changping. After finally squeezing out of the city, Su Ming got on the provincial road, took out 2 pairs of windproof glasses and put them on the Wolf Dog brothers, then stepped on the accelerator, and the Wrangler rushed to a speed of 100 per hour. Su Ming was sitting in the passenger seat. Although this savage had amazing fighting prowess, it was his first time riding in such a fast car. He was so frightened that he grabbed the handle of the car tightly and turned a little pale. The Wolf Dog brother was so courageous that he didn't even know what fear meant. He stood up half a man in the back row, with his front paws on the back of Su Ming's chair. He wore glasses and flicked his tongue in the wind, spitting stars flying around, and the hair on his head and neck was covered. I can't stop dancing like crazy. Take you two to get an education and know how to cherish the happy life in front of you, Su Ming said loudly. This business trip is all about dogs. Dog meat rolls 3 times, making gods unable to sit still. Many places in China have the tradition of eating dog meat, especially in May and June when lychees are ripe. Dog meat is eaten with lychees and rice wine, and it is regarded as a delicacy and a great tonic. A few years ago, it was reported that a large-scale dog meat festival was held in a certain southern city every May and June, and thousands of dogs of all kinds were slaughtered for food. This attracted the attention of dog lovers. Every time there was a dog meat festival, a large number of dog lovers would flock to the city and save dogs in various ways. This year was no exception. About a few months ago, a group of dog lovers got the news from somewhere that there was a large truck loaded with many dogs of unknown origin. The dog lovers spontaneously organized themselves and played a racing game on the highway. Finally, they forced the truck to stop in Changping County and asked the truck driver to hand over the dogs. Of course, the truck driver refused to do it. He was just a cargo carrier. If the cargo was lost, he had to compensate the owner, and he would have worked for nothing for half a year. So the two sides had a dispute, and it was said that blood was seen. Later, the police came and checked. These dogs did not have quarantine certificates and could not explain where they came from, so they were detained. The truck driver was also very depressed and swallowed his anger. Then the question came, how to place so many dogs? Changping County is just a county town, and there is no zoo. There is no way to deal with the eating, drinking, defecating, and medical treatment of so many dogs. The police comrades were also very smart. They threw the problem to the caring people. The dogs were saved by you, and you can figure out what to do next. It is okay for dog lovers to save dogs, but it seems that no one is willing to adopt these dirty, sick, ugly, disabled and sick dogs. They collected some money and sent more than 100 dogs to an animal rescue station in the suburbs of Changping County. The funds and conditions of the rescue station are limited. It is impossible to keep these dogs for a long time. Therefore, the superior unit arranged for the nearest Yangchuan Zoo to send people to investigate the situation on the spot and find a way to solve this problem. In theory, Changping County is a city under the jurisdiction of the provincial capital, and this matter should be solved by the provincial capital, but probably because the last time the finless porpoise made the provincial capital a little unhappy, it directly threw the burden to Yangchuan City, which is the closest in distance, as if to say that your zoo has capable people, so you can handle this matter. So the capable comrade Xiao Su shouldered the expectations of the organization and embarked on the journey of saving dogs. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 152. Su Ming and his two dogs were coquettish on the highway for more than half an hour. The convertible Wrangler and the Wolfdog brothers wearing windshield goggles were so busy that the passing cars couldn't help but look this way, until they stopped at a toll station. After being stopped by the traffic police, a middle-aged traffic policeman saluted and gave Su Ming a serious lesson. Although I can't find any traffic laws that can punish you, as a traffic policeman and a father, I need to remind you, driving dangerously will harm others and yourself. Although he was criticized, Su Ming was very grateful to this traffic police comrade. There is no one who does not make mistakes. Young people will always be frivolous, but if you know your mistakes, you should correct them. Being frivolous does not mean ignorance. It's all your fault. Something happened to Lei Fengla, so Su Ming turned around and severely criticized the Wolfdog brothers. He confiscated their windproof glasses and made them lie down in the back row and continue on the road. There are many mountains and rivers near Yangchuan and Changping. The Wrangler got off the highway and drove along the mountain ring road for a long time. Then he entered a bumpy dirt road and bumped along the dirt road until it reached its destination when it was almost dark. Land. From a distance, the aid station looks like a large farmyard, surrounded by a red brick wall. On the two old iron doors, there is a crooked iron sign with the following words written on it in paint. Name, Changping County Animal Rescue Station. As soon as the car stopped, Su Meng jumped out of the car, holding onto the car door and vomiting. This guy was not used to it all the way, and he suffered from severe motion sickness. Su Meng finally felt better after vomiting for a long time. He leaned against the car door with a pale face. The tall man, who was almost 2 meters tall, looked very weak. Su Ming was also speechless, so he brushed over with a burst of mental power. I found that this guy was not seriously injured, he just suffered from motion sickness. Strangely enough, mental power was of no use to anyone else, but it was useful to Su Meng. Is it because he is a savage, half human? Half animal? Or does this guy have a simple mind? The two wolfdogs were in good spirits, but their hair was messed up. The dog hair was messed up by the wind along the way. At first glance, they looked like picked up wild dogs. He took a bottle of mineral water from the car at the back and threw it to Su Meng, then walked up and knocked on the door. As soon as he walked to the gate, there were waves of dogs barking in the yard. Su Ming has been dealing with animals for a long time, and even without using his mental strength, he can tell that these cries are pitiful. They are not a demonstration, but a feeling of fear after hearing a stranger approach. The gatekeeper was an old man in his 50s, surnamed Lin, who was also the director of the animal rescue station. Su Ming explained his purpose to him and handed over his work permit. "Hey, you guys are finally here." Station Master Lin kept complaining as he opened the door, "You think those caring people are full of food, what are they doing with so many dogs? I only have 2 people here, how can I take care of them?" It was hard for Su Ming to say anything. Grassroots workers like Lao Lin also had their own difficulties. Just complain a few words. It was no big deal. While listening to Lao Lin complaining, he parked the car at the door, then followed Su Meng and the Wolfdog brothers and walked inside. As soon as he entered the courtyard gate, before he saw the dog, an unpleasant smell hit his nose, making him frown slightly. After walking in, I saw that the rather large yard looked like luggage was piled up. There were dog cages of various sizes everywhere. There were probably hundreds of cages. Some cages were already empty, and the remaining cages were all occupied with various dogs. The most common ones are the native dogs used in rural areas to guard homes and homes. In addition, there are also a small number of pet dogs, such as huskies, golden retrievers, and wolfhounds. Su Ming even saw a chihuahua and a bulldog. I really don't understand. Those local dogs and even huskies are still fleshy. What's going on with the chihuahua and Shar-Pei? This thing is covered with nothing but skin and bones, and no meat at all. How can it be eaten? Besides, dog meat is generally more delicious than black dogs or yellow dogs. Who has ever heard of eating chihuahuas? Whether they are local dogs or pet dogs, they all have one thing in common: dirty. The hair all over the body is sticky together, and at first glance it looks like a big mop head. Many dogs still have obvious scars, some have scars, some are still bleeding pus and blood, and some dogs even have his legs were bent at a weird angle, and it looked like they were broken. All in all, it looked pretty miserable. When the dogs saw someone coming, they shivered with fear and curled up desperately towards the corner of the cage, making a woo-woo sound. Su Meng followed behind without thinking too much. For him, these guys in front of him were no different from ordinary animals, and they were all edible. Su Meng's classification is very simple: there are only two categories, one is edible and the other is inedible. Su Ming and the wolf dog brothers cannot be eaten. It seems that these dogs should be edible. When the wolf dog brothers saw these same kind, they barked a few times, then trotted to the edge of the cage and sniffed the dogs in the cage. They were not malicious, but such a small gesture of intimacy from the same kind made the dog in the cage, the dog inside, was very frightened. Station Master Lin led the way, and as he walked, he complained all the way, saying that dog lovers were looking for trouble, and that his small rescue station had financial difficulties and could not afford to keep these dogs. Su Ming didn't say much. After Station Master Lin had finished complaining, he found an opportunity to ask, "Old Lin, how many dogs do we have here now? When we came here, there were 150 of them. Some died every day. Now there are only more than 80 left. Look, they are all here." Station Master Lin pointed to the yard in front of him and started complaining again, "Comrade Su, you are from above and don't know the difficulties we have here. You say, my small station only has an annual budget of 100,000 yuan, including my salary and the salary of a temporary worker. Where can I get the money to feed them? Can't we apply for some special funds from the competent authority?" Su Ming pointed to a dog with a broken hind leg and said, "At least give them some medicine, otherwise they will all die if this continues." Old Lin looked around and saw no one. He pulled Su Ming's sleeve and whispered, "Comrade Su, to be honest, our rescue station can't be compared with your zoo. It's a bottomless pit. No matter how much money we have, it's not enough. It's impossible to ignore it. This matter has been on the news." Su Ming frowned. He couldn't just watch so many animals die here. The money allocated is barely enough under normal circumstances, but who knew that hundreds of dogs would suddenly come? There must be an explanation. Su Ming frowned and said, "You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment." Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 153. Hearing Su Ming's question, Lao Lin's mouth twitched twice, his expression was a little embarrassed, and he said incoherently, "It happened too suddenly. The county's finances are tight, so funding must first be given to rescue stations in order to ensure the safety of animals, and our rescue station has never rescued so many dogs at one time. As the station manager, I can only do this. Now more and more dogs are dying, there is no way out, so I invited you here. If it really doesn't work, I can only find a way to solve it myself." Hearing what Lao Lin said, Su Ming very keenly sensed that something was wrong. The so-called "let's do it for now" to put it bluntly, means to ignore it. As time goes by, when all the dogs are dead, this hot potato will naturally cease to exist. This is called delaying time, and time can solve all problems. Of course, the rescue funds must be guaranteed to humans first. There is no problem with this. The animal rescue station has not been in arrears. The only reason to blame is that things happen too suddenly. Lao Lin has a hard time doing his job. Su Ming can understand. But what really made him feel weird was Lao Lin's words, "Solve it yourself." The ambulance station is only that big. Counting Lao Lin, there are only 2 employees. How can they solve the problem on their own? Could it be that these dogs were killed secretly? It shouldn't happen. If word of this gets out, not only the ambulance station, but also the higher level authorities will be in bad luck. Then the meaning of solve it yourself is worth pondering. In other words, did Lao Lin use some special methods to solve the funding problem? How to solve it? Su Ming asked, pretending to be casual. Ha ha ha, aren't you guys here? Old Lin chuckled, obviously not wanting to talk about this topic, and enthusiastically invited Su Ming and Su Meng into the room, saying, eat first, you guys, you've come all the way, you're tired from the journey, I'll ask Xiao Lin to prepare some wine for you. Xiao Lin is another employee of the ambulance station, a temporary worker, Lao Lin's only subordinate, and Lao Lin's nephew. Speaking of which, it is indeed not easy for grassroots workers like them. With a budget of 100,000 yuan a year, except for these 2 people's company, they still have to support such a large rescue station. Suddenly, hundreds of dogs came, and they were able to maintain this situation is already rare. No, I brought wine in the car. Su Ming took out a bottle of Wulianjai worth more than 400 yuan from the back of the Wrangler. Ever since he started dealing with the boss, he always kept a box of good wine and a few cartons of Chinese cigarettes in his trunk just in case of emergencies. Even ordinary families are reluctant to drink more than 400 Wulianjai, and they only use it to entertain relatives and friends during the New Year and holidays. Old Lin Xiaolin guards this shabby rescue station. How can he have the money to drink good wine, and he usually drinks 400 to 500 yuan of Wulianjai. Bulk wine costs RMB 1 pound. However, their drinking capacity was quite large. It didn't take long for the 3 of them to finish Su Ming's bottle of Wulianjai. Su Ming said hello to Su Meng, and Su Meng went to get another bottle. Old Lin Xiaolin was so dizzy after drinking that his tongue was so big, and Su Ming was also dizzy. Fortunately, Su Meng helped bring most of the wine. There is no big difference between drinking the sky and drinking water, so Su Ming still able to stay awake. I said, Old Lin, you guys are also weird, it's not easy. Su Ming burped, blushing, and said with a smile, with such a small amount of money, you have to do so much work, how can it be enough? Just raising the dog rescued this time will cost a lot of money, right? Lao Lin drank a lot and was already a little confused. Xiao Lin said drunkenly, it's not bad, it doesn't cost us money anyway. Huh, Su Ming's eyes lit up. What do you mean, it won't cost you any money? That's right, the rescue station has funds, Su Ming said with a smile, the state pays for it, but of course it doesn't cost you your own money. The state pays for it, Xiao Lin burped, it's not up to us to figure it out ourselves. Su Ming was about to say something, but Xiao Lin's body softened, he slipped under the table and fell down. Su Ming asked Su Meng to carry Old Lin Xiaolin, who had fallen down, to the bed, then left the room and stood in the yard. When the cold wind blew at night, he became more awake. From what they said while drinking just now, it can be determined that Old Lin and Xiaolin have other ways to make money and can barely maintain this ambulance station. What way? Su Ming scratched his head. He would never resell these dogs to dog dealers, would he? Not quite, this is something illegal. Although the uncle and nephew look a little shrewd, they are not the kind of bold people who may not dare to do illegal things. After all, they maintain the rescue station just to protect themselves. If the ambulance station can no longer operate, both of his jobs will be destroyed. What's the solution? Su Ming released a burst of mental power and tried to contact the injured dogs. Maybe these guys had lived here for a while and could give the answer. Unexpectedly, the mental power that is always harmful to animals does not seem to work on these dogs. Probably due to excessive fright, most dogs' thoughts are fragmented and broken, and they are unable to carry out the simplest communication. Many dogs even feel extremely nervous due to the sudden attack of mental power. Fear made no response to Su Ming at all. These guys are terrified. Just like a person who is surviving an earthquake and is in a period of shock. If you ask him anything at this time, he will not answer you. Even if he shows concern, the other party will not accept it. If you force him to ask, it may cause the other party to go crazy or suffer greater damage. The best and only way at this time is time. After a long time, the psychological trauma will gradually heal, and then it will be possible to communicate normally. In addition to being greatly frightened, Su Ming also discovered a very fatal problem: these pet dogs seem to be unfriendly. Although dogs and wolves have the same ancestor and are similar in size, they are fundamentally different. Wolves are wild animals and are born independent. Even Grey Fang, the Wolf King, and Su Ming can be said to have a good relationship, but there is absolutely no question of who depends on whom. In other words, even if Su Ming can command the wolves, if Su Ming is gone, Grey Fang and the others can survive without him, and there will be no psychological problems. But dogs are different. Dogs are pets, they are raised by people, accompany people, or help humans do things, so dogs are naturally close to people and have dependence. After several contacts, Su Ming found that these pet dogs in front of him seemed to have lost their dependence on humans. On the contrary, they have a deep sense of vigilance against humans. Just like a wolf in the wild, when it sees a person. In other words, it is called severe psychological trauma, which has caused irreversible mental damage to the person involved, oh no, the dog involved. Su Ming was a little puzzled. If he was just caught by someone, even if he was treated roughly when caught, there should not be such a big psychological trauma. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 154. After thinking about it, it was probably not Lao Lin and the others who abused the dog, because there was absolutely no need for it. So I checked the news reported at that time online on my mobile phone, and found out the reason. It turns out that these dogs have already gone through hell once. The first time they were rescued from the dog meat market, and then they were sold again for some unknown reason. This time they were rescued for the second time. There is only one explanation. These dogs saw countless of their kind being slaughtered alive in the dog meat market every day, and they were completely frightened. In desperation, Su Ming could only stop communicating with them and simply use his mental power to comfort them, hoping that they could calm down as much as possible. The result was not very good. After all, most of the dogs still had serious injuries. Physical trauma and psychological trauma are equally fatal. Hello, Director Song? It's Xiao Su Ming called Director Song. A child's voice could be heard faintly on the other end of the phone. Director Song should be taking care of his grandson at home. After telling Director Song about the situation here, Director Song was silent for a while and said, "You can take care of this matter yourself, but you have to think clearly. How will you deal with the subsequent events after bringing so many dogs back? According to the statement, these dogs cannot be adopted by others. If they are brought back, they will have to be kept by the zoo itself. Over time, it will definitely cost a lot of money, not only because of the money, but also because there are too many dogs that are difficult to manage." Dean Song Balabala said a lot, and finally sighed, "Hey, I just can't see out of sight and out of mind. If I were there myself and saw this scene, I would have to be soft-hearted. Well, let me get it done. It's up to you what to do. Su Ming knew what Director Song was worried about. The scale and level of the zoo are much higher than that of the rescue station, but that does not mean that the zoo has endless funds to squander. On the contrary, the family has a big business and a large expense. If there are nearly 100 more dogs, they will be raised in vain. It's also a big burden for the zoo. Moreover, as I just said to Dean Song, these dogs will definitely not be adopted and will have to be kept in the zoo. Even in a short period of time, they cannot be allowed to have too much contact with humans to avoid secondary psychological damage. In fact, Su Ming had thought of a way to deal with these dogs, and he could try to see if it would work. But what he is most curious about now is what's wrong with old Lin Xiaolin. Old Lin Xiaolin's snoring could be heard in the house, and Su Ming also drank a lot of wine. He had an average drinking capacity, so he became dizzy after drinking. After a while, he couldn't hold it back any longer, so he simply returned to the small guest room. Let's get some sleep first. He slept until around 10 o'clock the next morning. When Su Ming got up, Lao Lin and Xiao Lin had already gotten up. Each of them took a big basin with some mushy dog food in it and fed the dogs in the yard. Seeing Lao Lin Xiaolin, these dogs refused to eat, so Lao Lin Xiaolin could only use a spoon to scoop the paste into the small rice bowl in front of the dog cage. After they walked away, the dogs dared to lick the food carefully. The wolf dog brothers were running around, sniffing cage after cage, trying to express their affection. But the dogs still didn't pay much attention to them, which made them very boring. When they saw Su Ming coming out, they wagging their tails and ran to Su Ming's feet. Hey, 3 more died last night. If this trend continues, it won't be long before they all die. Lao Lin came over and sighed, and said, "What the hell is your zoo saying? We need to find a way out as soon as possible." "Where's the dead dog?" Su Ming asked. "I asked Xiao Lin to take it to the mountains, dig a hole and bury it deep." Su Ming became even more suspicious. What does this mean? Death without a body? He thought for a moment, and then said a little apologetically, "I had a phone call with our director last night. There are too many dogs here, and the zoo can't handle them. What we mean is that the zoo can send a batch of dog feed and I'll bring you a small amount of medicine, and I'll have to worry about you doing the rest." "That's no use," Lao Lin muttered, and then began to scold those dog lovers. Pointing to the dog cages, he said, "Why save these dogs? Kill them with one knife. Let them die quickly and be eaten by others. Anyway, it's still of some value, but it's better now. Not only will they die in the end, but it won't be a happy death. They will suffer, and it will also make us busy with our busy work." Su Ming was too lazy to listen to his complaints here. Maybe his complaints were justified, but complaining could not solve any problems, so he tidied up a little, then took Su Ming and the wolf dog brothers to the car again, and said, "Lin Station Chief, let's go now. I'm really sorry that I can't help you this time. I'll arrange for the zoo to send feed and other things as soon as possible after I get back." "Hey, that's the only way it can be. It's not easy for everyone, and we understand." Old Lin stretched out his rough big hand, shook hands with Su Ming, then sent Su Ming to the door and watched the Wrangler leave. It wasn't until the Wrangler gradually disappeared from sight that Lao Lin returned to the rescue station room. Not long after, Xiao Lin walked in from the outside and saw only Old Lin. He asked, "Uncle, are the people at the zoo gone?" "Well, let's go. What do these dogs say? If they don't accept it, we have nothing to do. We can only deal with it bit by bit." Old Lin looked back at the dogs and muttered, "What a sin." Su Ming drove the Wrangler and left the rescue station, but he did not leave Changping County. Instead, he found a small hotel to stay at the edge of the county, not far from the rescue station. "It's all up to you," Su Ming snapped his fingers at Er Guzi, who was hovering over his head. Goza buzzed and circled for a few times, then staggered out of the small hotel window and flew towards the rescue station. Su Ming knew very well that if he was still in the rescue station, Lao Lin and Xiao Lin would definitely not do anything, so if he wanted to find out what the two of them were up to, he had to leave first. But after he left, he had no way of knowing what they were doing. Whether he was afraid that Su Meng or the Wolfdog brothers would go to inquire, it would be too eye-catching. So the burden fell on Goza. This guy would arouse suspicion wherever he flew. Although his intelligence was not very good and it was impossible for him to narrate a thing completely, he could at least provide some fragments of what he saw, so he could roughly analyze what happened. While waiting for Goza's news, Su Ming lay on the small plank bed in the hotel with his legs crossed, chatting with Su Meng. Su Meng still couldn't speak human language, he could only make some simple syllables, opened his eyes and said oh, yeah, and I didn't know what he meant. In fact, after a day of contact with Lao Lin and Xiao Lin, Su Ming also felt that these two people were not bad people. It was really not easy for them to barely maintain this small rescue station with that little money. If it were him, with 100,000 yuan a year, including salary and rescue funds, he would have quit long ago. This is not a joke. With just this little money, the so-called rescue station is just a facade and can't do anything at all. But what is the trick between them? Su Ming is now a wealthy and idle person with a little wealth and a lot of time. If he doesn't figure this out, he will always feel itchy in his heart. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 155. Su Ming and Su Meng were waiting for Goza's news in the hotel, but Goza didn't come back until late at night. Su Ming was a little sleepy, so he put on his clothes and dozed off on the bed in the small hotel. Halfway through his sleep, he heard the door of the room move, and Su Ming jumped up with a start. With the light coming in from the corridor, he saw something like a business card stuffed in the crack of the door. He took it down and saw that it was printed with a fierce girl, a student girl, a white-collar worker, a married woman, and the contact number was 139. Su Ming rubbed his eyes and continued to lie on the bed. He was half asleep and half awake until the sky was light. Su Ming was almost completely asleep, and he felt something itchy on his face. Subconsciously, he wanted to slap it. Fortunately, he didn't hit him. Goza came back at some point and flew in through the window, lying on his face. If he had slapped him, Goza would have been killed by his own people. Don't lie on my face next time. Su Ming got up and rubbed his face, then used his mental power to communicate with Goza. Goza's intelligence was really not very good, and his expression was not very clear. It seemed that not long after he went back, a car drove to the rescue station. Lao Lin and his friends moved some dogs to the car, and the car left after staying for a while. These two people are not selling dogs privately, they are too bold, Su Ming was very surprised. To put it seriously, this is called embezzlement, just like a bank vault security guard who secretly takes out the gold in the vault and sells it. Of course, the value of dogs and gold is different, but the two are essentially the same, and both are serious violations of the law. It's true that you can't know a person's heart by knowing his face. Lao Lin and Xiao Lin both look very honest, but I didn't expect them to do such a thing in secret. I just don't know who they sold all those dogs to. If they end up flowing back to restaurants of all sizes, that would be great fun. Once this kind of thing is reported, it will definitely have a sensational effect. The crazy caring people, the poor injured dogs, and the rescue stations that secretly resell dogs, each point is very attractive. Do you remember the license plate number? Su Ming asked. Goza was buzzing and couldn't express it clearly. Later, he really couldn't do it anymore, so he just flew around in the air, running around everywhere, just like he was drunk, and no one knew what it meant. Oh, I understand, Su Ming looked at Gozi flying in front of him, and suddenly realized, fly again. So Gozi twisted his waist again, flying around in front of Su Ming seemingly without any rules, but this time Su Ming guessed what it meant. This guy couldn't express the human license plate number clearly, but remembered the pattern of the license plate number, and was using the flight trajectory to draw the license plate number. Su Ming recorded Gozi's flight trajectory and finally got a license plate number. From the license plate, it looked like a car from Jiangjin, the provincial capital. No, Su Ming slapped his forehead. What's the use of just a license plate number? There are cars everywhere on the road. Where can he find this car? It's like looking for a needle in a haystack. Unexpectedly, after Su Ming finished recording the license plate number, Gozi flew out of the window with a buzz. After circling outside the window for a while, it flew away with a buzz. Su Ming looked out of the window and saw Gozi flying far across the road. This is the entrance to the county town. There is a row of small hotels and restaurants along the street for people to rest and eat. Early in the morning, many people eat breakfast on the side of the road. There is also a row of various passing vehicles parked on the side of the road. Gozi parked on a large truck among them. Su Ming's eyes lit up. The license plate of this large truck is the one that Gozi drew. Su Ming, let's go. Su Ming hurried downstairs to the service desk to settle the bill, and then pretended to pass by and walked casually to the back of the truck. The back of the truck was covered with canvas, and it was impossible to tell from the outside what was being transported. Su Ming took advantage of the fact that no one around was paying attention, and quickly looked inside through the gap in the canvas. Sure enough, they were all dogs. Good job. After encouraging Gozi, Su Ming took Su Meng and the two wolfhounds, sat on the Wrangler, and parked not far from the truck to wait. After waiting for more than 20 minutes, a middle-aged man came out of a breakfast shop, got on the truck, started the truck, and drove away slowly. Su Ming also started the Wrangler and followed behind slowly. He wanted to see where the car was going to unload. Soon, the two cars drove out of the county one after another and got on the provincial road. After following for more than an hour, the truck left the provincial road and drove on the highway to Jiangjin. Using the violence of the news media has always been Su Ming's usual method. If you want to attract attention, you can't do it without the help of the media. While tracking, Su Ming called Nangong Yan. Hello, Nangong, I have a blockbuster news. Do you want to follow it? It's hard to explain on the phone. If you want to follow it, come to the provincial capital as quickly as possible. Call me when you get there. There was no explanation on the phone. He simply said a few words and hung up, and then continued to track. It can be said that the welfare of the TV station is good, or Nangong Yan's status in the station has been improved a lot because she has reported a lot of valuable news in recent times. When the station leader heard that it was Su Ming calling again, and specifically said that there was explosive news, he immediately asked Nangong Yan to take an interview car and go straight to Jiangjin. The large truck drove slowly on the highway, only about 80 kilometers per hour. Su Ming was not in a hurry, so he drove slowly behind. As a result, Nangong Yan's car arrived first. When they were approaching the Jiangjin toll station, both parties they connected the head and drove into the toll station one after another. At the toll station, Nangong saw Su Ming's very distinctive Wrangler at a glance, so he called him directly in the interview car behind him. What is the big news? You can't explain it clearly, and it's confusing me. I ran out in a hurry, applying makeup all the way. Su Ming laughed while sitting in the car. Sister, this time you are just showing off your flirtatious looks to a blind man. No matter how good your makeup is, it's useless. I'm afraid you'll have to make an unannounced visit this time. Ah. Then I brought a team and a car. Nangong Yan said depressedly in the car behind. Stop talking nonsense, hurry up, get in my car and bring a simple camera or something. The door of a commercial vehicle behind opened with a bang, and Nangongyan jumped out of the car in high heels, skipped to the Wrangler in front, and knocked on the window. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 156. Su Meng, sit in the back. Su Ming snapped his fingers at Su Meng. After Su Meng climbed to the back and sat with the wolf dog brothers, he opened the car door, and Nangongyan got up with a scoot in her hand. Wearing a pair of high heels. Is this your cousin? Hi, hello, my name is Nangongyan, your cousin's classmate. This was the first time Nangongyan saw Su Meng, and she greeted him politely. The two wolf dogs were so familiar with Nangongyan that no introduction was needed. After seeing Nangongyan, they squatted down on the back seat to flatter Nangongyan, sticking out their tongues and laughing at Nangongyan until she gasped. Su Meng didn't interact much with other people. Nangongyan greeted him, and he didn't know how to respond to Nangongyan's greetings. However, for a guy like him who has lived in the wild, he is very good at imitating, so he turned around to look at the two wolf dogs, scratched his head, and imitated the wolf dogs, squatting on the back seat, sticking out his tongue at Nangongyan, haha, gasping. Nangongyan was startled and asked Su Ming in a low voice, "Your cousin here?" While pointing to her temples, "Is there something wrong?" "You are not allowed to slander the unique greetings of our hometown," Su Ming said seriously. The corner of Nangongyan's mouth twitched twice, but she was used to Su Ming's often out-of-key manner. She made a sound, then casually pulled out the seat belt and buckled it, and then magically pulled out a small makeup box and put the car in. He opened the small mirror on the bed and touched up his makeup in front of the mirror. He said without turning his head, "What's going on? Tell me." Su Ming glanced at her out of the corner of his eye and said speechlessly, "No need to put on makeup, it's a secret visit." "What do you know? Who told you that you can't put on makeup when you are undercover? Besides, it is natural for women to put on makeup. Since it is an undercover visit, I will put on natural makeup." "Oh, you don't understand this. Why are you telling you this? Hurry up. Say, what's going on?" Women seem to be born with a great talent for makeup. While talking, Nangongyan looked at the small mirror. With one hand flying, she slapped her face for a while, taking a makeup remover and other things to quickly remove the original makeup. "I took it off, and then applied a lot of graffiti to create a so-called natural makeup, which looked quite natural." "Be careful, don't poke your eyes out." Su Ming saw her sitting in the car, using a sharp eyebrow pencil to draw her eyes. He couldn't help but feel a little scared, so he reminded her, and then briefly explained what happened. "Said it? Oh, I know. The last time those people rescued these dogs, some colleagues from our station went to interview them. There was quite a commotion at that time. They stopped the car delivering the dogs on the highway to try to stop them. The dogs were taken away, and the driver who delivered the dogs took out the knife. Finally, the police came and found that the dogs did not have quarantine certificates, so they detained them all. After the news report came out, the internet was very noisy. Hey you! What do you think of my makeup?" As Nangongyan spoke, she turned her head and looked at Su Ming with a smile. Su Ming was stunned by her ability to suddenly change the subject. He stared at her face for a few times before saying, "Not bad, she's pretty, yes, very similar to you. Why doesn't it sound like a good thing?" Nangongyan closed the makeup box, stuffed it into a small bag, and then pointed to the large truck in front. "Is this the car?" "Well, let's see where he transported the dog," Su Ming said. "Okay, you drive, I'll start taking pictures." Nangongyan had already taken out a handheld camera and started filming the big car in front of her. She said slowly, "This is the Yangchuan TV station. I am reporter Nangong Yan. I am currently conducting an undercover investigation program. According to insiders, according to the information provided, the two trucks in front of us contained dozens of dogs that were rescued by caring people 2 months ago. However, after these dogs only spent 2 months in the rescue station, I was secretly sent to these two large trucks with unknown destinations again, which is really suspicious. Now let's interview this insider, Comrade Su Ming, who is sitting next to me. Hey, don't take pictures of me. Before Su Ming could finish speaking, Nangong Yan gave Su Ming a shot with a smile, and added fuel to the flames. This face must be familiar to viewers, it's from Yangchuan City. Model worker, Guinness World Record holder, zoo legend, Comrade Su Ming, who has always been committed to animal protection. Comrade Su Ming, can you briefly tell me how you discovered this incident? This bad girl, you told me not to slap me and you slapped me again. Su Ming reached out and pinched Nangong Yan's thigh hard where the camera couldn't capture it. Nangong Yan grimaced in pain. Then he pretended to cough at the camera and said, "Let me correct you first, Guinness the record holder is my baby fish, not me. Okay, now we have seen that a large truck with dogs has entered the city of Jiangjin. Oh, it seems that the provincial capital is even more congested than our Yangchuan city. Taking advantage of this time, let us continue the interview. Comrade Su Ming, Comrade Su, what do you think about loving people saving dogs? There are two sides to the comments online. Some netizens believe that dogs are man's best friends and should not be treated like pigs and sheep. They strongly support the behavior of loving people. Some netizens believe that caring people are not qualified to enforce the law. The law is the bottom line of morality. It is an irrational behavior for them to talk about morality when breaking the law. I don't really watch it. Su Ming held the steering wheel and faced forward. He was too lazy to get involved in these boring arguments. Instead of having a verbal war, he might as well go to sleep. So he shrugged his shoulders, looked ahead and said expressionlessly, I think the most important job of a driver is to concentrate on observing the road conditions and be responsible for his own and others' lives, rather than talking nonsense while driving. What do you think? Pretty girl. Tisk, not cooperating at all. This part needs to be deleted. Nangong Yan glared at him with contempt, and then temporarily turned off the camera to save TV. The provincial capital was indeed very congested. It was less than 6 o'clock when I entered the city. It was not until 9:30 in the evening that I finally passed through the city and drove to a large building complex in the suburbs and stopped at the big iron gate. Su Ming and his car were parked far away at the edge of the woods behind. Huh? Why is it here? Why send the dog here? Nangong Yan was stunned when she looked at the big sign at the gate. Just follow them and you'll find out. Su Ming, you stay here with the dog. Nangong, come with me and climb the truck. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 157. The truck that transported the dogs was parked not far from the iron gate. The truck driver got off the truck and handed over something to the guard. Su Ming and Nangong Yan parked their cars far away and sneaked behind the truck in the dark. When Su Ming was a child, he lived in the mountains. Transportation was inconvenient. He had to walk every time he went to the city. He would get on any car he saw on the road to get a ride, so he developed a good skill in hitching a ride. No matter whether it was a tractor, a dump truck or a truck, as long as the back was not completely closed, he could get on it. Nangong Yan was in a more difficult situation. This girl grew up in the city. The day she opened her eyes, her family was picked up by a small car. She had never done this since she was a child, not to mention that she was wearing a pair of high heels. Her two little arms scratched at the back of the truck for a long time, but she couldn't climb up. Stupid, 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 Su Ming knocked her little head, then carried her up and put her on his shoulders. He grabbed the flipboard behind the car with one hand and stepped on the tires of the car with his feet. He climbed into the car with a force. Nangongyan's eyes almost popped out. When did you become so strong? I've always been very strong, but I'm just more low-key. Although the ability of the animal friend to improve physical fitness is not as exaggerated as in the cultivation novels, it is still no problem to carry a person weighing more than 100 pounds. I know, I must have lost weight recently, ha ha ha. Nangongyan laughed very stupidly. Keep your voice down, don't talk. Su Ming immediately gestured to Nangongyan with his index finger, signaling her not to talk, lest the driver hear. There are about 20 cages in the carriage, and they are filled with the dogs that have been seen in the rescue station. When they saw Su Ming, they still did not show any affection, but just looked at him numbly. Some of the timid dogs curled up in the corner. Shh. Don't bark either. Su Ming also secretly released some mental power, lest the dogs bark before Nangongyan. Not long after, the gate blocking the front opened, the driver got on the car, and the truck slowly drove inside. Along the way, through the gaps in the canvas at the back, young men and women often walked by on both sides of the car. Nangongyan leaned over to Su Ming's ear and whispered, "This is the Provincial Medical University. Why do you think they sent the dog here?" When the truck stopped at the door just now, Su Ming and the others saw that there was a sign of Jiangjin Medical University hanging on the big iron gate. Neither of them expected that the destination of the truck was not the dog meat restaurant or something as imagined, but a university. Maybe it was sent here for experiments. You forgot that our school also used animals for live experiments, Su Ming said. I'm from the Chinese department. How would I know about your department? Who said that? Didn't you say that the rabbit was delicious once? That rabbit was. Su Ming closed his mouth with a smirk on his face. Nangongyan was stunned for a moment. After several seconds, she pinched Su Ming fiercely. You are so inhuman. Stop it. The rabbit died after the experiment. It was anesthetized during the experiment and died peacefully. Nangongyan rolled her eyes, but if it was sent for experiments, there would be nothing to report. Medical schools across the country use live animals for experiments, which is also in line with regulations. At most, it means that the rescue station sells dogs privately, but this is not a big deal. After all, it is sold to universities, not individuals. This is true. Even Su Ming did not expect this result. But since he came here, he can't do nothing. He has to find a chance to get these dogs out. The butt determines the head. When he was a student, he could dissect the little white rabbit without mercy and eat it after finishing. Now he has changed his identity and turned into a big beast. It is really unacceptable for him to watch the dogs being experimented on. Soon, the truck stopped in front of a laboratory building, and Su Ming quickly jumped out of the car with Nangongyan. As soon as the two landed, the driver came from the front. Seeing two young people standing behind the car, the driver was stunned. What are you doing? Nangongyan was shocked and stunned. We are senior students, and we come to the laboratory building to do experiments, Su Ming asked back confidently. What are you doing? While saying this, he looked at the back of the truck. Oh, you are here to deliver experimental materials. The school was full of students, and the driver didn't think much about it. He thought they were just passing by and nodded. Oh, yes. Don't get close if you have nothing to do. These dogs haven't been quarantined yet. After that, he climbed onto the back of the car. While climbing, he muttered, why do students nowadays look so old? Su Ming, Nangongyan. The two obviously older students were speechless, and then walked to a school bench not far away and sat down to observe the situation here. Soon, several young male students came out of the lab building and helped the driver move the dogs into the building. Gozi followed from behind and circled in the woods not far away. Su Ming gave it an order to follow the students and see where the dogs were finally placed. Nangongyan had been pouting since she heard the phrase, why are you all so old? She sat down and took out a small mirror, looking at her face over and over again, muttering, "Am I old? Where am I old? Why am I old? Sister, please do your business." Su Ming glared at her and pointed at the small camera hidden in her bag. Nangongyan reluctantly said oh, then secretly turned on the camera and secretly filmed the scene in front of the teaching building through the small hole in the bag. After about 10 minutes, all the dogs on the truck were moved into the laboratory building. After the truck driver handed over to a guy who looked like a student leader, he drove away. "Let's go inside the building." Su Ming pulled Nangongyan and ran into the laboratory building. As a result, when they arrived at the gate of the laboratory building, something went wrong. The laboratory building required swiping the campus card to enter. Where did these two fake students get this thing? There were several cameras facing the door of the laboratory building not far away. It was obviously impossible to force their way in. "What should I do?" Nangongyan asked Su Ming. Su Ming scratched his head, looked around, and suddenly his eyes stopped at the door. The male student who had just handed over to the driver was still standing at the gate, smoking by the grove in the corner. With a roll of his eyes, he came up with a plan and turned to Nangongyan and said seriously, "Nangong, I don't think you are old at all, and you are very charming." "Really?" Nangongyan's eyebrows lit up, and then she was stunned again. "Huh? Why are you so sweet today?" Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 158. Of course there was a reason for Su Ming's sweet mouth. He told Nangongyan his plan with a smile. After Nangongyan heard this, she was so angry that she didn't even laugh. "You are simply inhuman." "Am I smart?" Su Ming said, raising his eyebrows in a mean manner. "But he's quite smart, look at me." Nangongyan laughed, quickly glanced at her eyebrows in the small mirror, then closed the mirror with a snap and stuffed it into her bag, held her head high and stepped on her high heels. He walked wrigglingly towards the woods. Su Ming looked around like a thief, then turned around and ran to an unobtrusive corner to wait. "Oh, hello, hello, how can I help you?" Peng Lin, chairman of the Medical Student Union, looked at the girl in front of him, and his eyes lit up. Both in terms of figure and temperament, she was obviously smaller than those in the university. Girls are all one step ahead. "That's it?" Nangongyan said in a cooing voice, "I graduated this year. Today I went back to the laboratory building to find the instructor to get information, but when I walked to the door, I remembered that I need a card to enter." Nangongyan blinked her eyes as she spoke, looking very helpless. "Classmate, can you do me a favor?" "No problem." Classmate Peng Lin didn't wait for Nangongyan to finish. His chest thumped loudly and he stamped out the cigarette butt. "Come on, I'll take you in." "Brother, you are so kind." Nangongyan followed Peng Lin toward the laboratory building with a smile on her face. Peng Lin was also very happy. Along the way, he was still asking classmates which department you were in. "I am the president of the student union. It is fate to meet you. Leave your phone number and I will treat you to dinner and a movie in the future." When he reached the gate, Peng Lin just took out his card. After opening the door, a man suddenly rushed out from a corner not far away like lightning. "Thank you, brother. This is my boyfriend. We came together today." "Goodbye." Nangongyan smiled sweetly at Peng Lin, then hugged Su Ming's arm, and the two of them walked into the laboratory building grandly, leaving only Peng Lin. The chairman stood alone at the door. Peng Lin looked at the backs of the two of them, and it took him a long time to hold back a sentence, and said depressedly, "I'm so stupid, the pigs have lost all the good cabbage." "Hey, why are you getting worse and worse now? You haven't noticed that you were full of bad intentions before?" Nangongyan was trembling with laughter on the way upstairs. "What do you say? I see you are having fun too, aren't you?" Su Ming followed Nangongyan's example, stretched out an orchid finger and poked Nangongyan on the head, and asked in a girlish way, Is that so? Ah, brother. Go to hell, it's disgusting. There were not many people in the laboratory building. Occasionally, a few students and teachers walked past, but they didn't pay much attention to Su Ming and the others. Probably the students thought Su Ming and the others were young teachers, and the teacher thought Su Ming and the others were students. All in all, it was a smooth journey. Su Ming is also a biology graduate and is quite familiar with the laboratory building. Most of the laboratories are pharmaceutical experiments. It is not like living organisms are being used everywhere as imagined. After all, living organisms are relatively expensive and there are not so many for students' use. There will also be several laboratories in the experimental building, with human specimens. They are usually in relatively remote laboratories, and they are dry. There is nothing scary in broad daylight. Urguzi has found out clearly that the dogs were temporarily left on the roof. Su Ming and Nangongyan climbed up the stairs and reached the top floor. There is no laboratory on this floor, just a door leading to the top floor. It is quite deserted and empty. As soon as the two of them walked up and before they entered the door, a teacher-looking person walked out from the corner. He looked at them both strangely and was ready to come up and ask something. Su Ming's mind turned around and he pretended not to see the teacher at all. He hugged Nangongyan, pressed her against the wall and started chewing her hard. Nangongyan was stunned for a moment, her eyes wide open. The teacher looked at them strangely for a few times, then shook his head and walked past them, probably mistaking them for two students secretly making out. Damn, you scared me. After the teacher left, Su Ming let go of Nangongyan and breathed a sigh of relief. After a long time, Nangongyan came to her senses and looked at Su Ming angrily with wide eyes. You took advantage of me. Sister, is this acting? Okay, Su Ming asked confidently. Fart. Do you need to stick out your tongue when acting? Nangongyan wiped the remaining saliva from her mouth and asked fiercely. I'm trying to be realistic. Don't you need to be dedicated to playing a small role? You don't need acting skills. Su Ming was still confident, and before Nangongyan got angry, he quickly turned around and walked towards the small door leading to the rooftop. Stop being so nagging, I'll let you kiss me later. Nangongyan replied fiercely, this is what you said. If you dare to go back on your word in the future, kid, you will be dead. Ah, wow, the weather is so nice, Su Ming laughed, and walked over to the rooftop in a daze. The weather was indeed good, the moon was bright and the stars were sparse. A big, round moon hung in the sky, and not a trace of haze could be seen. During this time, the provincial capital held the two sessions, and the weather was particularly good. It was good weather every day, and the smog and pollution were gone. I really don't understand why the weather is so good every time there is a conference or something like that. It can be seen that our party and our country are following the destiny, and we are the sons of destiny. Stop talking nonsense. Fortunately, my camera can be used at night, otherwise it would still be unclear. Nangongyan took out the camera and tried it. It was pretty good. A high-end product would not be unable to capture clearly due to darkness. Under the leadership of Urguzi, Su Ming and the others found a group of dogs in cages behind the large water tank on the roof. Surprisingly, in addition to these newly arrived dogs, there were 7 or 8 other dogs tied to the pipe behind the water tank. How could this happen? Nangongyan's eyes suddenly widened when she saw these dogs, and Su Ming's scalp also felt numb. Almost all of the 7 or 8 dogs in front of me were injured, and they were simply wrapped in dirty gauze. There was still blood seeping out of the gauze. Some had their stomachs broken open, and some still had shocking wounds on their bodies. 1 or even 2 front legs were missing from the wounds, and foul-smelling pus leaked from the wounds. The key is, these dogs are alive. Lying on the ground, he let out a vague wailing, his eyes no longer even looked helpless, only confused. Su Ming used his mental power to investigate and found that these dogs had no sense of mind. They were basically either stupid or just one breath away from death. What the hell? How could this happen? Even Su Ming was a little annoyed. In the past, when they did experiments, they would give the animals a good time and then kill them after the experiment. It was impossible to just finish the experiment and just kill these injured animals. Animals, abandon them here and let them die in extreme pain. This has exceeded the bottom line of scientific research. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 159. Can they still be saved? Nangong Yan's face turned pale. She held up the camera and filmed the dogs that had been tested but were still alive, and asked Su Ming in a low voice. Su Ming sighed and shook his head. Animal Friends is not omnipotent. These dogs are only one breath away from death. If they can be saved, it would be against the will of heaven, and there would be no death in the world. He turned his head and picked up a large canvas to cover the dogs that were just delivered and still locked in cages. Then he walked to the 7 or 8 dogs that had been tested, gritted his teeth, and broke their necks one by one. "You, what are you doing?" Nangong Yan asked in surprise. "Those who can't be saved, give them a quick death, so that they don't suffer." Su Ming sighed. How could this happen? Experiments can't be so cruel. Nangong Yan is still a girl, kind by nature. She stared at Su Ming and asked, "You didn't do this before, did you?" "How is it possible?" Su Ming thought that after my first experiment in my freshman year, I dug a grave for the unlucky rabbit. Later, I got used to it and didn't bother. But the teacher who led the experiment at that time clearly told them in the first experimental class that using animals for experiments was a last resort, but it was absolutely not allowed to inflict unnecessary torture on animals. From a certain perspective, the animals that Su Ming and his team used for experiments at that time were treated very well in all aspects when they were alive. In summer, he would hide in the laboratory and use the air conditioning of the animals. All animals, including humans, will die, but death is different from death. Just when the two were a little confused, the iron door leading to the rooftop creaked in the distance, and someone else went up to the rooftop and walked towards the side. "Hide!" Su Ming quickly pulled Nangong Yan and hid behind the dog cages. The footsteps were getting closer and closer, and soon they came to the big water tank. Then they saw 2 students coming out, a boy and a girl. The boy looked familiar. In the moonlight, it turned out to be Peng Lin who had led them into the laboratory building just now. The girl was unfamiliar. Peng Lin was holding a small yellow dog in his hand. There was a sutured wound on the back of the yellow dog, and it was dying, hanging limply in Peng Lin's hand. Peng Lin threw the yellow dog on the ground. "Brother, isn't this a bad idea?" the girl frowned when she saw this. Because it was night, the dogs on the ground were almost dead and didn't move much, and they didn't notice that their necks had been broken. Peng Lin said in a nonchalant tone, "What's the matter? Anyway, the experiment is done, just leave them here and let them fend for themselves." "But that's too inhumane, after all, they are all lives," the girl objected. "Then what do you think we should do? Are we going to give them an injection? A shot costs several dozen yuan, and that's all our experimental funds," Peng Lin said. "The problem isn't the so-called experimental funds used for experiments. Anyway, the school has allocated this money, and you don't have to pay for it yourself," the girl retorted. "Save as much as you can," Peng Lin said slowly and persuadingly with the tone of an experienced person. "Think about it, you will die in the end anyway. There is no difference between dying with an injection and waiting to die here. Why waste money? It sounds good, but if your stomach is cut open and you are left here to die, how would you feel?" The girl snorted unconvinced, and then whispered, "The money you saved went into your own pocket." Peng Lin's face sank. Don't say this everywhere. Brother, we are from the same hometown. I am kindly reminding you that if you mess around like this, something will happen. If it gets out, do you still want to graduate? The girl advised. You are so soft-hearted, Penlin said as he was about to catch the dog from the cage. Without even raising his head, he said, stop talking nonsense. Pick another dog. The lab below is waiting for it. Besides, who will report it? You think too much. We are a national higher education institution. Who will come to report it here? If you don't tell me and I don't tell you, who will know? I know, I will report it. Nangongyan suddenly jumped out from behind the cage with a camera and started to shoot at Penlin. Ghost, the girl was shocked. Penlin was stunned. What a higher education institution. You've read so many books. Su Ming appeared from behind like a ghost. He got a brick from somewhere and hit Penlin on the head. With a snap, the brick broke into two pieces. Penlin's eyelid slumped and his body fell down limply. He was knocked unconscious. Remember to cut this part. Su Ming made a V sign at Nangongyan with the brick. You didn't beat him to death, did you? Nangongyan was also stunned. What a joke, it's just a brick. Su Ming said casually, then cracked his mouth, turned his head and showed a very kind smile to the little girl. Little sister, tell big brother, what's going on? The little girl opened her eyes wide and stared at Su Ming for a long time, and suddenly her eyelids fluttered, and her body fell down limply. Su Ming and Nangongyan were really dumbfounded. They didn't expect the little girl to be so timid that she fainted. They pinched her Renzhong and gave artificial respiration. Of course, this time it was Nangongyan who did it, but the little girl just didn't wake up. Later, Su Ming got ruthless and reached out to untie the little girl's belt. The little girl sat up in a flash, like a corpse. Big brother and big sister, it's really none of my business, I advised him. The little girl cried. Nangongyan rolled her eyes at Su Ming, don't scare the child. Then she returned the belt to the little girl and comforted her, saying, don't be afraid, we are not bad people. I am a reporter. This guy who looks like a gangster is actually a model worker and a party member. The little girl was even more scared. Until Nangongyan took out her reporter's card and Su Ming also showed his work card, the little girl finally believed that the two people in front of her were not bad people, and she told Nangongyan the inside story. Just as they had just heard, these dogs were used for experiments. The school allocates a sum of experimental funds every year, including money for the painless death of the experimental subjects. In order to save money, Penlin, who was in charge of the experimental funds, simply threw the animals that had finished the experiment to the roof alive and left them to die. Damn, how much money can this save? Su Ming was also a semi-professional. He calculated in his mind that he could only save 3,000 or 4,000 yuan a year. Do you think everyone is as rich as you? Don't forget that when we were in school, you only had 300 yuan for living expenses, Nangongyan said. Penlin, who was knocked unconscious, woke up and looked over here blankly. He was greeted by another brick. Su Ming raised the brick and shook it in front of his face, grinning and said, classmate, I won't let you go for taking advantage of my girlfriend just now. Now I ask a question and you answer it. If you lie, I will use the brick to lift your face, okay? Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 160. Penlin was also extremely depressed. He looked at Nangongyan, feeling aggrieved. He wanted to say something like I didn't take advantage of her, she deceived my feelings, but when he saw the brick in Su Ming's hand, he turned his words into brother, ask me, I will tell you everything. Okay, let's start from the beginning. Where did you buy these dogs? It should be said that the quality of the current Communist Youth League members and young pioneers is really too poor. They don't have the tough bones of Lu Hulin and Wang Erxiao at all. The interrogation process was very smooth. Su Ming asked a question, and Pen Lin could often answer dozens of questions. Not long after, everything was clear. All the dogs were bought from the rescue station, 100 each. As for the saved funds, all of them were put into Pen Lin's own pocket. He used the money to operate and organize the election of the student union chairman. What a joke, do you think you are the president of the United States? It costs money to elect the student union chairman. Su Ming felt that his brain was not enough. Pen Lin said with a sad face, "Brother, you have graduated for many years, you don't know the situation. It's too difficult to be elected as the president of the student union now. If you don't treat people to food and drink and build good relationships, who will vote for you when the time comes?" Su Ming rolled his eyes. "So you elected as the president of the student union just to treat everyone to food and drink? So I should praise you for serving the people. Isn't it that being elected as the president is prestigious, and it also gives you more opportunities to interact with female classmates?" Pen Lin said, while secretly glancing at Nangong Yan. Nangong Yan glared, took the brick from Su Ming's hand, and shook it at Pen Lin. "If you look at me again, I will hit you." Pen Lin shivered with fear and quickly pointed at the little girl. No, brother and sister, I'm talking about them." After figuring out the situation, Su Ming and Nangong took Pen Lin to the Changping County Rescue Station together. As the saying goes, if you catch an adulterer, you have to catch both of them. You have to confront Lao Lin and Xiao Lin face to face, otherwise it will become a one-sided story. Pen Lin was reluctant at first, and even thought about whether to find an opportunity to escape. But after seeing the big man Su Meng sitting in the car and the two big wolfhounds, he threw this idea out of his mind. Along the way, Pen Lin even admired Su Ming a little bit when he learned that this wrangler cost hundreds of thousands. Young people always have an inexplicable feeling for authoritative and successful people. On the one hand, it is jealousy, and more is envy. Especially when this successful person is about the same age as them. Of course, Su Ming is not a successful person now, but in the eyes of a little guy like Pen Lin who breaks the law for 3,000 or 4,000 yuan a year, he is definitely a great figure. The wrangler returned to the rescue station. Lao Lin came to open the door, and saw Pen Lin sitting in the back of the car at a glance. Lao Lin's face changed at that time. "Station Master Lin, I've confessed everything, why don't you confess too? It would be a pity if Pen Lin didn't go to act. For someone like him, he doesn't even need makeup to play a traitor." "Well, what else can I say now? I can't do anything about it," old Lin sighed. "Let's go inside and talk." When he entered the room, Xiao Lin was also there, peeling sugarcane with a knife in his hand. When he looked up and saw Su Ming and the others coming in, Xiao Lin was stunned and subconsciously shook the knife. "What are you going to do? Are you going to kill people to silence them?" Pen Lin was startled and hid behind Su Ming. Then Xiao Lin cut off a piece of sugar cane with a puff and handed it to Su Ming. "Do you want to eat it? I just picked it up in the field this morning." Su Ming took it and chewed it. It was really sweet. He turned around and asked Nangong Yan if she wanted to eat it. Nangong Yan glared at him and said, "Let's talk business." "Oh, yes, Lao Lin, what on earth are you doing? How can you secretly buy the dog from the rescue station and seek personal gain?" Su Ming asked righteously, holding a half-bitten sugar cane in one hand. Lao Lin squatted in the corner, holding his head, and said depressedly, "We have no choice." "Be more specific, what do you mean by no choice?" Pen Lin said in a pretentious manner. "I bought the dog for scientific research, I have no choice." As soon as he finished speaking, Nangong Yan snorted in dissatisfaction. Su Ming went over and pulled Lao Lin up. "Let's sit down and talk." After saying that, he turned around and glared at Pen Lin, pointing to the corner. "Go squat there. I'm on the same side as you guys." Pen Lin had a sad face and squatted in the corner honestly. Lao Lin sighed again and said, Comrade Su, you said I was seeking personal gain, but I don't admit that. Think about it, if I sell it to a university, a dog will cost 100 yuan, right? But if I sell it to a restaurant, a pound of dog meat will cost several dozen yuan in a restaurant. A dog weighs 4 or 5 pounds, and a heavy one weighs 20 or 30 pounds. If I'm greedy for money, I will sell it directly to the restaurant. I won't say much about a dog. On average, I can get 150 or less than 200 yuan. It shouldn't be a problem. Su Ming and Nangongyan looked at each other. What Lao Lin said was actually quite realistic and not wrong. That's right, selling it to a university is at least used for research, Xiao Lin muttered on the side. Yes, we are doing research, Peng Lin wanted to interrupt, but Su Ming glared at him and he kept silent. Also, look, if I really wanted to make money, why did I only sell more than 20 dogs? Including the last time, there are only more than 40 dogs, less than 50, old Lin stood up and pointed outside, look, there are more than 50 dogs in the yard. If I wanted to make money, I would just buy them all. Brother Su, my uncle is really at his wits' end. Xiao Lin spitted the sugar cane on the ground fiercely, and said depressedly, so many dogs came at once, and they need money for food, drink, defecation, urination, and medical treatment. The government doesn't allocate a penny, and let us figure it out by ourselves. How can we figure it out? We don't know how to print money. We can only use this idea, sell some dogs, and use the money from selling dogs to raise the remaining dogs. It would be best if someone can take these dogs away. If no one takes them away, when there is no money, sell another batch of dogs and use the money to raise the remaining dogs. That's not right. Didn't the kind-hearted people who sent the dogs leave money? Nangongyan asked. What's that enough for? It was spent in more than a month, old Lin said. Xiao Lin said angrily, at this point, you have taken the picture, and we also admit the matter. You can do whatever you want. At worst, I will pack up and leave. I'm tired of this aggrieved rescue station. What do you think, how to deal with it? Nangongyan asked Su Ming hesitantly. Nangongyan was originally going to make a big report and severely punish a few bad guys, but now it seems that they all have their own difficulties. Of course, that Peng Lin does not count. Let me think about it. Su Ming walked around the yard with his hands behind his back. Outside the remaining dog cages, there were small enamel basins with food inside. There was also a faint smell of disinfectant in the air in the yard. It seems that Lao Lin and Xiao Lin really did not embezzle the money. Nangongyan also followed out, looked back at the room, and whispered to Su Ming, actually, they are not bad people. Peng Lin is a bit hateful, but Lao Lin and Xiao Lin are excusable. If they report it directly, Lao Lin and Xiao Lin will definitely lose their jobs. Not only will they lose their jobs, they may also be subject to legal prosecution. But this matter can't just be left alone, right? Su Ming said. Of course, that's why I came to discuss with you. You have a lot of tricks. Nangongyan put one arm on Su Ming's shoulder and said with a smile, think about it and think of a good way.